Alex here with another install video. This time I'm going to show you how I installed the Wolfbox G900 mirror dashcam. However, the process is going to be very similar, if not almost identical, for other Wolfbox mirror dashcam because they use pretty much the same connections. And stay tuned till the end of the video because I'll share with you a couple more tips and tricks for the mirror dashcam installation, as well as some of the reasoning of why I install it in a specific way and why I run cables in a specific order. And I have also placed links in the description down below to the Wolfbox mirror dashcam, as well as to my Wolfbox mirror dashcam reviews if you need to check those out. And first, let's get familiar with the kit. In addition to the dashcam, we get mounting straps, and we actually get two sizes of them, large one and smaller ones for smaller mirrors. We also get a GPS antenna, and we get a power cable. Next, we also have a rear camera extension, and we get the rear camera. Now, the rear camera is going to use a double-sided tape to be mounted to the vehicle, and additionally, this is an optional bracket that is included, and this can potentially be mounted on the rear camera to allow for tilt. Most of the time, this can be mounted directly without the bracket, but the bracket does help in certain situations. And I'll start by mounting the dashcam with the two included straps, one on each side. Next is the GPS antenna. I'm gonna plug it in, then I'll begin to tuck the cable in the trim of the car using my hands and the included installation tool. And I'll continue to feed the cable into this area of the vehicle, which we call the A-pillar. Notice that I have reached the dash of the vehicle, which is where I'm gonna place the GPS antenna. The rear camera extension cable is next. Same as before, I'll hide the cable into the trim of the car, but notice that I'm going to route it towards the driver's side of the vehicle. Since this car does not have an airbag in this area, I'm able to cross the cable across the A-pillar as I begin to head towards the back of the car. And had there been an airbag in that area, which we call the A-pillar, then the installation is going to be a little bit different because I'm going to have to work around that airbag, not putting the cable over it, but instead what I do, I put the cable underneath it. So the installation process can become a little bit more complex, and I have made another video showing the potential dangers of working around the airbag and how I get around it. I'll put a link to that video in the description down below. Now I'll continue to run the cable towards the rear of the vehicle using my fingers and the installation tool in areas that are a little bit tight, like this B-pillar. And this area that we call the B-pillar can also potentially contain an airbag, especially on newer vehicles. So here I would not want to put a cable over that airbag. I will use the same techniques that I did for the A-pillar, where I avoid the airbag altogether by routing the cable underneath the airbag. And now I'm going to continue to head towards the back of the vehicle. Same here, notice how I use the tool to lift the trim and help me to hide the cable. And at this point, I often have a lot of excess cable left, and this area typically has extra space that I can use to hide this extra cable. However, on newer vehicles, there is a potential that there is another airbag in this area, which means I would not want to use this area to hide the excess cable. I would find another place that's away and clear for the airbags to hide any extra cable. Mounting the rear camera is next, and I normally place it right in the middle of the rear windshield. However, in this case, there is a vinyl that the owner wants to keep, so I'm going to offset the placement of the camera a little bit towards the side. The rear camera has double-sided tape. I'm going to peel this and apply it to a clean windshield. Now I can tuck the rear camera cable into the trim, heading towards the extension cable. I'm going to line both of these guys together and fully connect them. Then I can hide them into the trim of the vehicle. Also notice that I can adjust the angle of the camera to adjust the view, and then I can lock it in place by tightening the screws on each side of it. Last is the power cable. Same process as before, I hide the cable with my fingers and the installation tool in areas where it's a little bit tight. And I like to be gentle with these cables because if I am very aggressive with them, I could break them on the inside. So they'll look good from the outside, but they could potentially be broken on the inside by being too aggressive with them. Just like before, I'm able to cross the cable over the A-pillar because this car does not have an airbag in this area. If there was an airbag, I would not want to cross it like this. Then I head down the A-pillar towards the bottom of the vehicle. Now while most of it is done with my fingers, sometimes it does help me to pull the weather strip and run the cable, and then I can put the weather strip back. And now that I reach the footwell of the vehicle, I can route the cable towards the power outlet. And the most important part here is that I make sure that the cable is fully secure away from the pedals for safety. And I usually use several cable ties to ensure that the cable won't fall down. I also place a couple of cable clips on the center console leading to the power outlet, but technically the cable can also be hidden into the trim of the car. And with this thing plugged in, the installation of the mirror dashcam is now complete. And now let's cover a couple of additional tips and tricks. First is the cable situation by the pedals where the brake and accelerator pedal are, and as you saw, I routed the power cable really right by that area, but I secured it very tightly with some cable ties to ensure that that cable is not gonna fall down and get in the way and become a safety hazard. However, that whole situation could potentially be avoided by running the power cable not towards the driver's side, but instead to run it towards the passenger side, and now there, when it comes down to the footwell area, there is no pedals that could potentially be affected, unless your vehicle happens to be of the right-hand drive configuration instead of the left-hand drive configuration. But there could also be an airbag in the footwell area of the vehicle, and I've seen these airbags sometimes on only the passenger side, and sometimes I've seen them on both the passenger side and the driver's side. So that's another consideration that I take when deciding whether to run the power cable towards the passenger side or towards the driver's side. Moving over to the power cable, you may have noticed that I installed that cable at the very end. First I put the GPS cable, then the rear camera extension cable, but the power cable was last. And I did that because it is possible that later on I might decide to hardwire a dashcam, which means I will have to remove that cable to install the hardwire kit cable. And if I put the power cable first and then I put more cables in front of it, such as the GPS cable or the rear camera extension cable, when I want to pull that power cable out, it's probably going to pull the other cables out as well. So by installing the power cable at the end, it is easier for me to remove it later in the future if I want to upgrade to a hardwire kit. Now let's talk about the GPS antenna. As you saw, I routed that towards the passenger side of the vehicle, but I could have also routed that towards the driver's side of the vehicle. The reason why I send it towards the passenger side is I like to spread out the cables. There are normally 3 cables, like you saw, GPS, power cable, and rear camera extension cable. Instead of having all 3 cables be forced in one direction and all 3 of them underneath a headliner, that could become bulky, and potentially some headliners are very tight, may not have a lot of space for those 3 cables. So by spreading the cables out, sending some this way and sending some this way, it makes it easier for me to install in and to keep the headliner nice and flat, and there is not going to be any kind of bulging from having too many cables in one direction. The other thing you may have noticed with the GPS antenna is that it has double-sided tape in the bottom, and that double-sided tape can be peeled and then the antenna could be attached to the dashboard of the vehicle. That way it's not moving around or rattling around. Now, I normally do not attach the GPS antenna to the dashboard of my vehicle because I am not a fan of sticking things to my dash, and then what if I want to remove it later down the road? I could potentially end up with some kind of residue on there. So I normally just place my antenna right on top of the dashboard, and the cable is enough just to keep it in that area. But it is possible that if you have a very loud sound sound system or you live in a place that has a very bumpy road, that antenna could be jumping up and down or moving left to right, possibly even rattling against the windshield. And in those cases, I would recommend securing that antenna to the dashboard to ensure that it's not gonna be just jumping around and potentially get damaged in the process and also making unnecessary noise. And finally, let's talk about why I placed the camera on the interior of the vehicle. The rear camera could also be placed on the exterior of the vehicle. Most Wolfbox mirror dashcams support a waterproof rear camera, so the camera could potentially be routed all the way out, typically by the license plate of the vehicle. However, this involves routing the cable from the interior of the car out to the trunk and then from the trunk all the way out to the license plate area, and sometimes this can be a little bit tricky. And I have made another video showing how that process looks as far as routing the cable all the way to the outside. And I have another video coming where I cover inside mounting and outside mounting and the disadvantages and advantages for each. So stay tuned. I think that video will help you decide if it's worth enough to have that camera be routed all the way to the outside, or if you're gonna be satisfied with an inside mounting solution. And to give you a small preview, one of the things I often run into is very heavy window tint, specifically limo tint. And people ask me, if I have window tint, can the rear camera be placed on the inside of the vehicle? And the answer is yes, it could definitely be placed on the inside of the vehicle. And can the camera actually see the outside of the vehicle? If it's during the day and it's nice and sunny, even with limo tint, the camera will be able to see outside of the vehicle. Now, what happens at night? Well, it will be the equivalent of you driving around with sunglasses at night. Your visibility is going to be greatly decreased, and if those sunglasses that you're wearing are very, very dark, it is possible that you may not potentially be able to see much. And the same thing can happen to the rear camera when mounted on the inside of the vehicle and there is heavy window tint. We can potentially not have any usable video from the rear camera in those situations, and that's probably one of those cases where I definitely would say outside installation would make more sense than inside installation. That being said, there are some people that do very little driving at night and they seem to be okay with that limitation. And you also may be wondering about parking assistance and how that is activated. The reverse guidelines when you put the car on reverse. Those are activated by connecting one extra wire to the reversing taillights of the vehicle. And I have made another video where I cover that process in great detail. I'll put a link to that in the description down below. I'm also gonna put links in the description to the dashcam as well as to my other dashcam reviews in case you wanna check those out. And if you guys have any other questions regarding this, please put that in the comments down below. If you found any part of this video helpful, make sure you hit the like button to support the channel, and stay tuned as I have a lot more installation and review videos coming up. Thank you guys for watching, and as always, I'll see you on the next one.